hard to really get into video and content creation without knowing what you know about branding. So as we pull up the slides, so some of the keywords I want us to think about is if you spitfire some keywords that's related to your brand. So what's your brand? Keywords. Jamaica. Content creation. R&B. Same R&B. So industry, and a lot of these things you realize that you're saying is related to you and your identity. So the biggest thing about brand is it's not something you're inventing so much as it is, it's already there. It's like more about identifying your brand. So in this slide, in a couple of these slides, you'll see that I do use the word brand. I hate using the word to define the word, but the concept is it's already in you. It's already there. It's more about honing into it and using it to communicate your message. So some of the words that we already spoke on to speak on it is about, no, if you go back, I do want to touch on some of these. So we mentioned persona, but where we are as emerging artists. I'm an emerging artist. I mean, I'm always emerging, ever learning, but at this state in time, I would say I'm an emerging artist, and part of what we're doing is understanding marketing. This plays into marketing content creation. So everybody here is on social media, right? And we talked about a lot of social media platforms, but the biggest thing I communicate is YouTube. YouTube as a way of long-form content that you can always cut up later on. So I will get into that later on, but I just want to touch on that. And you can go to the next slide. So typically, I like to talk about you all, but I also like to give a little backstory if everybody's quiet, because sometimes I work with classes that are just like, doesn't want to communicate. So this is just, and you have the access to the slides, this is just a backstory. So if you all are quiet, and I'm gonna go back to Jaden. And Jaden is both, you got a Jaden that's a boy, and a Jaden, whatever you want to identify, but this is you. This is your story, theoretically. So we're gonna skip through it, but I just want to give you that idea. So if you all are quiet, I'm gonna go back to Jaden, and Jaden is you, is me, it's all of us. Okay. So in essence, the biggest thing about being branding when it comes to musicians, artists, is like you have your brand, which is your house, but then you have these sub-brands, which are rooms that I like to relate to be like your albums, your events, those, for lack of better words, touch points that you're doing that's also communicating your brand, but you can kind of niche down because some events are going to be for families that you're doing, but then some events you have, an album you might have is for younger generation where you can be more expressive and use more of your lingo that they can understand. So I really wanted to think about that. And one of the things Christina said that I was like almost got excited for, I had to keep myself down, was mindset. The biggest thing I want you to take away is not that you're going to remember everything. It's more about adopting the mindset of branding. That way you can communicate in everything you do. So even in your presence and what you're doing, presentation. Today, part of my brand is like I'm always got all these bags. I'm like kind of got my phone in my hand. I got another phone in my back pocket just in case I'm mic'd up. Got my video. All of this is part of your brand, and I get really excited about these things. So if I'm speaking too fast, calm me down. All right. So biggest thing, those 4 points that I want to touch on is identifying your audience, identify your brand, communicate, and consistency. Some of these C's you're going to recognize from Christina's, which is awesome. So that almost like you're getting it twice. So it should mean even more that you should listen and try these things. So we'll go to the next slide. And I appreciate you so much because I didn't know how I was going to be doing this. So without getting into the gist of all of these things, because you have access to these slides, so think about these and identifying your audience. You think about demographics, ages, and you can do this for every time you do something. So every time you have an event, you want to think about who you're targeting. If it's the same, it's the same. Part of that is identifying the audience, interest, persona, and your methods. So with the methods, skipping over all of these things that we kind of read and get through, the method is the biggest part I want to emphasize because the methods kind of go into the analytics. So you already been doing things. So the benefit of already doing things is like you have an ability to say, okay, only 100 views on this video, on this reel, only 100 likes, and 100 is a lot, so let's stop there. But when you say these things, you want to be able to know that, okay, this is how I touched on this audience. So this might be this picture of my family. Christina mentioned my family gets a lot of likes too. I think it's my kids, but we're not going to try to figure it out. But the matter of the fact is when I do see those, I can use that because when I am performing for a family audience, I might pitch, instead of just me standing with a microphone, it might be me and my family because part of my brand is my family. I'm a father of 4. So it's hard to hide that when they're all behind you. So you want to take into consideration your analytics and part of what you're doing, your surveys, your polls, and that's something you can do at your events, after you release an album, personally. So I might come up to you. What's your name? Maricela. I might say, hey, how did you like my speaking? Was I using my hands too much? Did you feel like I was calls you out by asking you for your name. And these other insights kind of let me know what I'm doing next time. So I want us to really take in consideration the methods. And these are the takeaways from this, and you can read that on your own. You can go to the next slide. All right, so these are personas that we kind of use in marketing to slow us down and actually think strategically about who we are as artists. So right now, we're going to go back to Jaden for the sake of time. So Jaden is an R&B artist, and he's doing an event, and he realized that he's a more R&B, so his soulful is really tied to emotion. So his target audience is going to probably take this humanistic persona. So knowing that their response is emotional and they slow, not slow in speed, but slow in response, okay? Stop. Slow in response. Let's not get distracted. I distracted myself just then. But slow in response, meaning that when he advertised a month in advance, is anybody really going to buy tickets? They're not. It's good to do. Don't do it. I mean, still do it. But knowing this audience, knowing how they respond, is going to help him then relax, stick to his plan, his content calendar, his timeline that Christina mentioned, to know that, okay, who I'm approaching is humanistic. So I have to tie to their emotions. So posting the event graphic is great. I should do that because I can also invite people in. Go ahead.
Do you have any tips of ways you could identify audience with these?
Well, yes. So that would go back to the analytics. So I would say the ways you do it is first studying these. There's so many ways you can do it. So if you just look at these personas, this helps when I'm communicating to my clients, simplify it. So to answer your question, I would say the ways you would do it is when you look at your analytics, you can relate it to genre of the music, or you can relate it to age, because certain ages fall into certain categories. For younger generation, are typically more, sometimes you get us in this competitive, act now, 5 left. So that's how you really play into, you have to actually think about it. It's a psychology to it, which is why I'm glad to have my background in psychology, because it plays into marketing and branding a lot. And let's say you do all this and you still get it wrong. You didn't mess up. You just learned now how to aim, because it's ever changing. So this is really how it ties into your planning, your branding, and that's just more so of a 4 personas that you can use for any of your things. And go ahead.
Could you give examples of the type of people that would be in each category?
And I can, and it varies. And so that's kind of what I was just. And what's your name?
Potential.
But your name is Potential? Oh, awesome, man. I love it. So the examples of each one of these things. So this is where you can get my opinion is coming out, okay? So ladies may be more emotional and slower to respond, meaning you got to establish trust. I'm not just going to come to your event just because you look good on the flyer. I need to see who you are by way of your social media, how you're talking about it. Dallas is great about doing it. I'm sorry to point you out. She's great about posting the event, but then following it up with a lot of conversation and just going live, and and you can understand her emotion. And so any audience that's engaged by a humanistic persona would be then, okay, I trust this a little bit more. I'm gonna spend my $10, and it's actually gonna happen. So I'm using this one because it can touch on different things, but that's just the way you understand. We already know how each other respond. You know who your audience is from your analytics. And you just have to do a lot of evidence-based assumptions that ties into why. Because I think I fall here sometimes, but then when I'm really excited about something and it's making all this sense, and it's Coca or it's the city of Tallahassee, that's very logical in their approach, I'm pretty fast about that because I know springtime Tallahassee, it's going to be thick. I'm moving on that. So that plays into these personas too, because sometimes I switch. And I hope I answered your question. Okay, and we'll go to the next slide. So this plays into your brand, which I mentioned earlier is a reflection of yourself. We'll skip through the stories and everything, but we will touch on each one of them. So your story is already said, your brand is already there. It's more about identifying it and tying it into your message. So the way I made this bold because I'm big about video content. So that's the easiest way for people to actually see you outside of you having to be in their face all the time. And those touch points, what I refer to them as touch points, is made by posting on your social media, commenting on other people's social media, and these are just the way I would say you create touch points outside of being in front of that person, which is why branding and your color, having consistent color use and fonts and verbiage, your message is such an important thing to have. Keep going, keep consistent with. No, don't go change that. No, I want to make sure. Oh, so the biggest thing that my mentor had taught me was that you get on stages. Get on stages. Stages aren't just stages. Stages are podcasts. Stages are jumping on people's lives. Stages are just that. Stages where you're standing in front of people and you owning your story. It might sound like you're telling your story over and over again, but that's part of it. I mean, it's essentially your story. It's not something you're making up where your first time it was a lady with blonde hair and the second time you told the story she was bald-headed. You know, it's not going to change. Your story is going to be the same, so it's okay. And this is something my mentor had to tell me. So I encourage everyone else, when you're talking about your brand, get on stages. And those stages can look like anything, okay? But typically, when I say it, it's podcast related, and then performance stages, both small and large, all right? And my biggest thing about identifying yourself is like journaling. So the biggest part of me identifying my brand as RJ the Creator before I was RJ3 Stacks. And we're not going to go down the line about how many different personas I have by way of social media. But the biggest part that helped me understand what I'm doing today and how it related to each one of those things is that I create content. I'm a creator. So I take two things that probably don't have anything to do with each other, find a way for them to come together and produce it to the world. So in essence, that's how that plays into your getting on stage, your journaling, and your mood board. These are just tips that I've provided to help you identify your brand through those experiences. And we can go to the next slide. These are just prompts to go with your journaling and something for you to think about. One of the things I did want to emphasize is what I highlighted here. The themes or messages you do consistently incorporate into your lyrics or composition. So if you think about what themes and messages you consistently do already, by way of music, does anybody have anything that they do consistently that maybe nobody even realized, but you just do it? Okay, no, it's still. You might apply it to your lyrics. You might throw a patois in your lyrics. I mean, that's part of your brand.
For me, I'm more so centered around like the business side of it. So every day I'd always talk with the same group of people around like things that are happening within the industry or like music that people are sort of talking about and why, or something that just resonates with me in the moment. But it might not be something like it's hard.
Well, no, because that's still you doing help me out right now because it's current events. So you're talking about current events as it relates to your target audience.
Yeah, but more so how it also like how it incorporates into our life as well. I don't know, like I just listened to XYZ this morning. Why did you do that? I don't know. It just made me feel like little things, but it also I don't know what I'm trying to say.
No, but you don't know what you're saying. It's harder to communicate. That's all it is. Yeah. You know exactly what you're trying to say, but it's just difficult to communicate it. And that's the importance of getting on stages and doing just that, because the room is here to help. Everybody in this room is here to help you communicate that. We're not going to throw something at you as soon as you mess up. So one of the things I do is I take the word create and I put a dot in between the T and whatever follows it. So it's RJ the Creator. When you look on Instagram, you're going to see a dot in between the T and the O. When you see Creators, my nonprofit organization, which is a collective of, I got D-Mac, my creative director back in the back, and he's on my board too. And we're about collective creating, doing exactly what I'm about, bringing people together to execute projects from a creative standpoint. But my theme is putting that dot in between that T and that O.
I think a really cool one. With my name on my content creation brand being Imani the Musical, everything that I do is based around a musical. So if I'm showing off like my hair or something, it's under my highlights, hair, makeup, and wardrobe. If I'm like suggesting music, it's under my highlights called score. And so everything is like based around a musical. So like if I have a project, I call it Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act this, blah, blah. So that's just how everything with me evolves.
Okay. So musically like a theater more so. Okay, I thought it was just like music by way of playing, but that's awesome. See?
Like an actual musical.
And knowing that story allows people you tie into people's emotions to know you have doesn't matter if you understood it or not, but as it relates to like patois, I don't really say I understand it. But knowing that it's something you're doing that's with such intention, action behind it, is like moves me. I'm like, I want to know more. I'm gonna listen to your music to say like, oh, okay, I'm hearing it. I thought he just messed up and mumbled. I thought he was, I don't know. But this is something I just want us to think about, encourage us to think about, and just to reflect. This helps you with your journaling and just self-reflection. I encourage you to do it find someone in your tribe. We mentioned tribe earlier. Find someone in your tribe that you can just sit down and have some intentional conversation with, who's willing to eat. This year, I'm all about eating with people that want to eat. I'm not going to project that off on you where you're at in your journey, but I'm really big about this, and essentially doing this with other people is eating to me. So we go to the next slide.
Write that one down.
So communicating. So when we think about communicating by way of branding and marketing, we think about social media. Yes, cool. Like, I'm not going to try to dive into that so much, but we will want to also understand that there are other components outside of social media. Christina mentioned press releases. I'm big about blogs now because I think it's an untapped market as it relates to having an event, then writing a blog about it. And with ChatGPT, there's no reason why you shouldn't just have an event. Take some notes about how people smiled at this part, quick notes, throw in the ChatGPT, and get a whole article. Now you got a blog. You have another touch point that you can use to go behind your video or your picture. And you take that, you put it on your website. We mentioned which platform, and I was right. I'm glad I didn't have to say anything because Christina went. So I can be the devil's advocate and say website. I would definitely say get your website and have it. That way you can easily send people to that. And it adds credibility to your name by way of branding. As an artist, Rj.the.creat.or.com, bing, and I'm here, and it's like, oh my gosh. I'm sending emails from admin at Rj.the.creat, whatever my name is. And that's a great way to add credibility behind branding. And that's the biggest part as it relates to marketing and communication and consistency that we're talking about, that we understand but don't really put a pin in. Yeah.
Do you have any website like advice, like tips or some website I could use? First time coming to mind is Wix, but I don't know if Wix is like as.
Yeah, I actually reached out to one of my joint venture partners earlier today, but he didn't get back with me in time. But I would recommend his program. It's called One Link. If you look up One Link, I can't think of what exactly. It's called One Link. And basically what it is, they create you a website, and it's not as much as a website as it is a better link tree. And it allows you to do a lot more without overwhelming yourself with being a web developer. I picked up being a web developer on accident because I needed a website and I couldn't afford it. So I'm not going to put that pressure off on you. So my answer to your question is One Link. But I'm also going to add my communication so you all can reach back out to me, and I'll reach back out to Dallas or whoever to give you access to that. So you can try it out, and they'll make you a website. And then all you have to do is purchase you a domain name, which is $12, $13. I don't know how crazy y'all domain name is going to be. But ranges from there, and you purchase that tied to that web link. So every time I type in your name or whatever, it goes to that. Like, that's just a great way to get you credibility behind it. It's like fake it till you make it. It's a lack of other words. So those are kind of the biggest things I wanted to get to. And I do want to come to performances and how you connect, who you connect with. So some of my friends might know I'm big about branding today. I'm bigger about branding today than I was 5 years ago. I would probably post anything, share anything. But with the level of intent I'm at right now, I'm like, oh, I could love you, but how does that really? That's not what I'm trying to do right now. Which is why I have so many different platforms, because I have this platform where I can just release and just post. Don't have to think about this. But then my creators page is very strategy based. Yeah, it has a cohesive, it has a brand, and it also came through growth. So, I think that would be the gist, and you can see the takeaways, and we'll go to the next slide. So these are things you can do. I'm really big about having some immediate takeaways from each one of these because it doesn't mean anything to me. I didn't learn as much as I learned from reading and listening to somebody. I had to do that. So this is what I wanted to give you as things you can do right now to really identify that brand and communicating that brand and what you're doing already. So one of the things I put down here is a brand guide and a brand strategy. And I put a circle there because you can start either way. Branding strategy kind of starts where you brainstorm and you put a strategy behind whys and your 5 W's, as Christina mentioned. It's kind of where that strategy kind of comes. The brand guide to me is like a visual element of that. And I would preach about a brand guide all day because I was trying to do a brand guide allowed me to be able to bring Dallas, or what was your name? Sierra in to my project and confidently show them what we're supposed to look like on paper and give them a task, and they can then use that as a foundation to help me communicate my message. So when I send Dallas out to the set with something, with a task to do, she kind of has an idea of what visuals I'm going for. Hey, I need some pictures. This is my brand guide, and she can do that. So that kind of goes back into your tribe and being able to direct and produce your tribe into knowing how they can advocate for your brand. So they're just not out there saying, oh, yeah, my boy Rj.the Factor. And they love you, and they don't mean no harm. But when you have that brand guide, you're able to communicate to them your tribe and also extend outside of your tribe to those that just want to help, that are big about volunteering and just want to know how they can amplify or just be involved into you because they really love I really like you as an artist. I really want to support. How can I? So when you get those people, like those how can I people, and you don't have that brand guide, it's like, you're not ready. And I've run into that a couple of times where I wasn't ready, and I had to follow up with them months later when I was ready. But imagine having a brand guide and somebody say, how can I help you? And I say, this is how.
Like what type of things you feel like should be in a brand guide for artists?
I'll get to that too. Okay. But keep that question because I might forget. All right. So consistency, we talked about that earlier. And I always say touch points. Consistency used to scare me because I thought that meant, post every day, post all the time, posting a story, post here. And I got all these platforms. Who I'm going to post? Can you post for me? Like, it's too much. But now I realize that it's not so much consistency. And Christina mentioned it. If you're going to post once a month, do that. And that's fine. But I think it's more about, I like to call them touch points. You're creating all these touch points in the community. So by going to these events, by going to different community events, that's a touch point. Posting on your social media, that's a touch point. Following up with people, that's another touch point. It doesn't always have to be in your face marketing. It could just really be an exchange. Like I remembered your name and I follow up with you. I'm creating a touch point. I mean, that's a strategy behind it, but in essence, I could actually be genuinely interested too. And it just goes with my brand, but it's more about being intentional and creating these touch points outside of. And if I'm speaking for the room, we don't have the money part of it. I don't have the money part of it. So I can't afford to just be reserved and shy. I have to be out in the community. I have to be I have to voice. I have to mess up. I have to fall. But through all of those experiences, you're not really failing because you're just creating more touch points. And adding a fuel to your story, for lack of better words. So video and photo, I'm big about that. Content creation, video. It goes hand in hand. I could go into more detail about it, but in essence, I would say what that should look like for artists is not just your music, but also just you talking about it. And that goes back into getting those stages. If you have friends in the community that are starting a podcast or have a platform, hey, have them join you sit down and put a camera in front of you and just have a conversation. You could pick a couple of topics that you might want to talk about, or you could just have a conversation about a current event. And I know that's not what you were saying earlier, but that was just at the top of my mind as it relates to like just having a conversation and using that to then create another touch point. So and use your music in that intro or in that background. Like I think people don't realize how valuable your music is as it relates to, especially me. I need your music. I'm gonna ask you right now, when y'all done, send me some music. Because when I do events, a lot of times I'm streaming my events and I'm like, I need some intro music, and I hate, going to all these artistly and all these things to pay for it. I'd rather just use somebody local because I'm really big about community and that's a part of my brand. So what I look like going somewhere else and then it's damaging to my brand. People not gonna look that deep into it, but I feel it. So this is just a part of what we think about when it's a video and photo. Then content creations, content calendar, schedule posts. That's the biggest thing you can do right there. Schedule it and just forget it. I use both Canva and I use Business Suites, which is meta-based. But Canva schedules it too. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's web pay, yeah.
No, but I'm not a premium though.
Okay, yeah, you good. Yeah, it does. You link it to your platforms. It posts to your page and everything. Yeah. Only thing that gets me about Instagram with it posting to Instagram is like, how Instagram you need the reels and the audio and you gotta sync it and that's where it kind of where I can't use it.
Good to do like
pictures and or if you have a video that might be just self-explanatory where you don't have to tie it into the.
Create a video in Canva, would that audio be good to sync proper?
In Canva.
Yeah.
Audio in Canva too.
Because then
you put the audio in Canva.
it might still get flagged though if it's not like the word, if it's not that copyright.
Like if it's your own music,
that's different.
it'll be like,
But you can't throw a Drake song on there thinking it. Okay, go.
Even if it's your music, I've gotten copyrighted for using my own song before because they didn't have me to verify it.
That's
Okay. Through Instagram?
Through, it could have been Instagram. I think it was Instagram, but I know for a fact it was on some sort of platform. And I put a song and it was like, I think it was on Instagram.
I know Instagram would be the one that I think would flag you.
And I was like, guys, it's my song.
Yeah. So, but these are what I use for scheduling. I know we got to that. Now let's look into that. You got to be ever learning, right?
Yeah.
So, but content, scheduling your posts is the biggest thing, and the website, I kind of touched on that earlier. We go to the next slide. So this is kind of like what my brand guide looks like by way of the creators. Now this is a condensed version, but it's just, to me, it's just clear and it's simplistic to just who I am as a brand, and then we can get into details once you asked about artists. So what does it look like as an artist? I would say it'd be heavily dependent on how you plan to communicate, but I think the foundation should be color, text, and then kind of like the feel or tone of what you go for by way of content. So for ours, you see I have my primary logo, a secondary logo, which I might switch because I use this one so much more. But then I have my tones, my color code down here, my text, my fonts. This is my secondary, my accent font, and this is just my text font. And then I have images that kind of give you a feel of the vibe for the page, and the vibe for like what I'm doing in the community. So this is a great foundation to have as a brand guide, and you can do this in Canva. I did this in Canva. Template. Yeah, they have templates in there as well. So, but this is a great foundation I think so artists should have by way, and you can always build onto this, which is so great, because you can get as detailed to having letterheads, PowerPoints, what your PowerPoints looks like when you do presentations, or album. Like let's not get lost. But you get what I'm saying? Yeah. Okay. All right, so this is just essentially what a brand guide looks like for me, but that's also what you can look like for you as an artist from getting the started standpoint. Okay. All right, so these are just my resource recommendations. So I mentioned Canva already, and you already know the extent of what Canva can do. Between video, it does so much more than I have listed up there, but between video editing, graphics, and illustrations. Everybody using Canva?
Yes.
I love it. Okay, perfect. So there's no reason why everybody using paid Canva?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I'm still on my free
And so the thing I did with before I started using paid Canva, one thing Canva does is like nonprofits, you get access to Canva for free. So that was like one of the biggest things that allowed me I got it for free because I'm tied to a lot of nonprofits and they're not using it.
Like the EIN and all stuff in? Like nonprofit?
No.
Because I said Venom is technically a nonprofit.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that you have to do is make sure that you are searchable. I won't say you have to plug in your EIN, but it did allow me to type in my organization, and it verifies it. I won't give you back office how it works.
You registered fully as well.
Yeah. But that comes. As long as you know. I just want you to know where you have access to it. But before I paid for it, I was doing it free, and I was doing so much of what I've been doing through my history with the free until I got to a place where I'm like, okay, it's worth paying this $14 or whatever. Because it allows me to do this and that and that. I just won't eat on Thursdays, okay? Like, that's just a level of sacrifice. CapCut, we using CapCut video?
Yes,
Okay, CapCut, it's a lot of in-house. Yeah, D-Mac put me on CapCut. He gonna take credit before I do. But CapCut is a great free resource that allows you to do both mobile editing and web-based editing. Yeah, I'm really big on CapCut. I don't do it for a lot of my professional level editing, but you can. The reason I just don't do it there because it sounds better when I edit it on Adobe Premiere. It just sounds better when I'm talking to my clients. Like, I edited this on Adobe. If I say CapCut, they're like, no. But from a starting standpoint, CapCut would be the resource I recommend for that. Fiverr is a great resource. I put a money sign for it because that's just when you are able to invest, and I emphasize major projects. I think it's a great investment. Sometimes I have to just stop. I can't do it all. I'm not trying to wear all these hats. I don't want to wear 2 or 3 hats at a time. So sometimes I put $50 or so on the side to find someone to outsource my album or outsource someone. And if I could do this locally, I would. But at the same time, I'm not about paying someone $50 when their work is $200, especially if I don't have a relationship with them. So if you have a relationship and a touch point, then that's different. But I'm just going based off not having it, you use your own money. But this kind of goes into that joint venture partners. So this is just a term that basically means let's work together, let's collab. But you'll realize that in the corporate world, they just call it joint venture partners. It just sounds better. JV partners is what they refer to it as. And I think we should adopt this early on because it's going to add credibility. So when those labels look at you and you already kind of have this understanding of brand and they see whether it works or not, and working is in quotations because who knows what works given today. Today is like time. Anything can blow up at any time. But the importance about labels and having people see you is that they see you value it already. They see you have a clear understanding of intentional, you're not just posting, you're not just doing anything, you're taking your brand serious, and they can easily work with somebody who's taking it serious. They can eat with you because you already see that you bringing something to the table, and they just need to give you some more guidance or direction or resources, really. So joint venture partners is kind of where that plays into leveraging resources. Bartering is not a word that I like to use, but you understand it to be I do for you, you do for me. Networking is another word that I think should complement joint venture partners, just because that's essentially what it is. You are communicating with people, and then taking those interactions and following up. So the biggest thing as it relates to joint venture partners is following up. Even if you feel like you don't have anything to say, I think it's just important to just maintain that touch point by way of communicating via email or whatever it is. Social media is a great way that I can do that with a lot of people my age or people that are active on social media. But another way I do that is just simply by email, by calling. Hey man, my heart, something moved me today. I seen a picture. I don't know what story I tied to it, but sometimes I just tie it to it and I'm just checking in. And a lot of times, let's say once out of 3 times, which is a lot when it comes to making money, these lead to events or exchanges or some level, oh man, I got this coming up, can you do that? But more importantly, it's about creating that touch point. So I think that would be what I would want to recommend resources, and we'll go to the next, and that's kind of it. So that's me, and I kind of gave you a link to follow up with me. This kid leads you to my Hi Hello, which has my cell phone number. I'm glad it's a small class, because I took a risk. I was like, hey, Dallas, how many in there? Yeah. So, but you have access to my website, my number, and everything. That way we can go from there. But I encourage you really to follow up, because I would love to sit down and have a one-on-one to actually give you a point of direction and also help you in whichever way I can. And I am Rj the Creator, and I'm the president and founder of Creators. And I invite you to follow us on Facebook, Instagram. I do want to get us on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is going to allow us to connect with those organizations that are more corporate based. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Any questions, immediate questions? I feel like I did a good job.